Many of us discover that there are parts of ourselves that we have spent years criticizing. And I invite us today to see that underneath that, there's grief and tenderness and compassion. Because layer after layer after layer are our self-judgments, are the expectations that were placed on us, and were seasons in our life where we were asked to hold more than we were actually able to hold. Hi, I'm Jana Shalom, and this is In Good Company. This is a space for those of us who are weaving nervous system care back into our lives without fixing ourselves or trying to get it right. Each month, we hold one real question from the field and stay with it together. If you have a question for us to hold, please share it in the comments or send it to us via email at support@weavinglegacy.com. We are in good company. Today's question comes from the field. The more I learn about myself, the more I realize there were reasons I became this way. And I don't quite know how to hold that. I've been thinking about that sentence in relation to my own life. And the more I learn about myself, the more I realize there are reasons that I became the way that I am. And I've been thinking about that and how interesting it is that I don't think I actually learned that about myself first. I learned it from others. For nearly 20 years, I worked as an early childhood educator. Many of the families I served were carrying an enormous amount of responsibility. Some of these families were single-parent households, working multiple jobs. Some of them were caregivers who were just trying to keep food on the table and the lights on. Adults just really trying to make sure that the children in their care are safe and that they're taken care of and that they can make it through another week. And at the same time, the district that I worked for strongly believed in having what they called a college-going culture, which is beautiful and wonderful. Except that the homework expectations were quite rigorous, even for kindergarten. And I remember watching 5-year-olds come to school upset because they didn't have their homework done because no one was able to sit down with them and help them do it. Many of the families that I worked with care deeply for their children, but they're navigating demands and pressures and responsibilities that leave very little room for anything else. Survival was already asking so much of them. A parent working night shift cannot simultaneously be sitting next to their child at the kitchen table discussing reading strategies. And a caregiver carrying the weight of 3 jobs might not have any energy at the end of the day. The more I listened to these stories, the more something became visible. What looks like indifference is often exhaustion. And what looks like a lack of commitment is often a family holding down so many things that they're not able to add another thing to their plate. And to be honest, when I was in the thick of child rearing and working full time, I was in this exact same scenario. Again and again, I found myself discovering that this story is so much larger than just the behavior and the actions that we see. The more I listened, the less interested I became in conclusions. Because eventually that realization moved closer to my own home. There was a season where my own capacity could offer very little regulation to my children. It just simply wasn't there. My nervous system was running on empty. And what I offered in those moments, it wasn't necessarily safety, it was survival. And when I began slowing down just enough to listen, something shifted. I started to pay attention beneath the things that lived outside of behavior, such as sensory needs, emotional needs, or understanding that, wait a minute, I just have limited capacity right now. Somewhere in that process, I began to see myself and what I spent in years seeing in families. There are reasons, there's conditions, expectations, and contexts that I didn't fully consider. there was more to understand than I realized. And so when I hear the question, why am I like this? I recognize something familiar. That experience of discovering there is more to the story than what we first realize is the experience of looking at ourselves through a different lens. It's the experience of realizing that what once felt obvious may not have been the whole picture the whole time. And suddenly we find ourselves looking at ourselves through a new lens. On today's episode of In Good Company, we're holding that question from the field. The more I learn about myself, the more I realize I became this way for a reason, but I don't quite know how to hold that. When we first begin understanding ourselves, we start with what is most visible: our habits, our patterns, the ways we've learned to move through the world, things that we often don't think about. But for the first time, these things can begin to feel like a whole story unless we take a moment to realize, wait a minute, I haven't always been this way. This isn't just who I am. This isn't just how I function. Something needs to shift. Maybe a conversation lands differently. Maybe memories return with new meaning. Maybe connection appears between things that we once thought were unrelated. But once we've learned that, wait a minute, we don't necessarily need to fix this part. We need to understand it's revealing our history. And as context becomes visible, our attention can begin to expand beyond just the patterns we see. Instead of being, I'm the responsible one, I'm the helper, I'm the achiever, I'm the peacemaker, I'm the perfectionist, I'm the independent one, we can realize that we haven't always been the person who's held it all together. We may have been the person who no one ever asked to help us. We may be the person that everyone counts on because no one else shows up. Sometimes we call these things strength. Sometimes we call them flaws. Sometimes we call them personalities. But really, they're descriptions of things that have become familiar with us over time. They become our story. And because we've been telling the story for so long, we rarely question it. But then something happens and something begins to shift. And we realize that what we have been labeling as the responsible one is actually revealing burdens that no one else could see. In labeling ourselves the independent one, we're revealing where no one was able to meet us in a mutual way. When we say we're the person who never asked for help, we're revealing that it might once have cost us something to not step in. And when I think of my own story, this is the part that changed everything. For a long time, I understood those years through what was visible. I saw my exhaustion, my reactivity. I saw the moments where I showed up in the years as a parent that was not actually the parent that I wanted to be. And I felt disconnected from who I wanted to be. Those were the things I could see. Those were the parts that I evaluated within myself. Then something deeper came into view. Beneath that reactivity, I was depleted. I was exhausted. Beneath the carrying was a nervous system that was incredibly strained. Beneath the person trying really, really hard to care for everyone was somebody who was stretched so far beyond her own capacity, she couldn't even care for herself. And once I understood, wait, this is not a personal failing on my end. This is simply revealing the conditions I have been living in. What I once judged, I now have context for. And within that context, a new layer appears. There's depth here. There's history. There's experiences. There's relationships. And there's seasons of life. Some seasons just happen to take more capacity than others. Each of these layers is helping us understand the layer above it and the layer below it. And it's helping us become more human, more tender, and more complete within ourselves and within our connections to others. As these layers become visible, another realization often runs alongside them. What once looked like perfectionism is actually self-sufficiency. It's responsibility. It's being prepared. It's people-pleasing. And oftentimes underneath that is a need for belonging, a need for safety, for connection, for stability, and for hope. And sometimes the fear of losing something precious, we can see the other outer layer, which is we begin to act in patterns. When we are in fear, we move through patterns. But I want us to look at those patterns as devotion, a sincere attempt to protect, preserve, maintain togetherness. Many of us discover that there are parts of ourselves that we have spent years criticizing. And I invite us today to see that underneath that, there's grief and tenderness and compassion. Because layer after layer after layer are our self-judgments, are the expectations that were placed on us, and were seasons in our life where we were asked to hold more than we were actually able to hold. And perhaps little by little, we begin meeting ourselves with a little bit of curiosity. Perhaps I am the way that I am because this is what I needed in order to survive. And perhaps that is just enough for today, because we are in good company. If you have questions for the field, please email us at support@weavinglegacy.com or comment below.